Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for attending this breakout session. My name is Tamara Lewis, and I will introduce our presenter and moderate the Q&A portion of this session. Just briefly on my background, I work at the Jefferson County Public School District in Louisville, Kentucky. I am a specialist of accountability and data systems. My work includes project management and coordinator of several programs and data systems within the district. One of the programs I coordinate is NAEP TUDA. TUDA is the Trial Urban District Assessment for Jefferson County, which is my relation to having the privilege to be moderator for the session of the 2021 IES Reading Summit. While this presentation is pre-recorded, I will join you live to moderate the Q&A session following the presentation. So please type your questions in the chat space. If you have not already done so, you may download resources for the session located in the website resource file. Now it is my pleasure to introduce Dr. Pamela Mason. Dr. Mason is a senior lecturer in education and the director of the Language and Literacy Master's Program and the Janine Call Reading Lab at the Harvard Graduate School of Education. Dr. Mason has extensive experience as a reading language arts curriculum coordinator, and she has significant and extensive elementary school principal experience serving in both urban and suburban districts. She is active in many professional organizations and literacy instructions globally, and she is currently the faculty member of the Partnership for Justice Education Educators investigating education provided to incarcerated youth. This session you are attending today is titled Talking, Thinking, and Reading Comprehension Strategies for Primary Grade Learners by Dr. Pamela Mason.
Welcome to our session on Talking, Thinking, and Reading Comprehension Strategies for Primary Grade Learners. I would like to begin by honoring the Native people on whose land I live and learn, the Nipmuc, the Wampanoag of Gay Head, and the Wampanoag of Mashpee. You live and learn on the occupied lands of many Native people, and we honor them and their commitment to the land and to learning. I would like to also recognize those who were enslaved. These are images from Massachusetts, the Middle Passage marker on Long Wharf, a statue of Harriet Tubman, and the Abel Smith Schoolhouse on Beacon Hill, the first public school for African students in Boston. During our session, we're going to consider three questions. Really, how does oral language support reading comprehension for primary grade learners? How oral language is really important and an asset to our multilingual primary grade learners, and how discussion routines support comprehension for our primary learners. As we begin, I would like you to call a learner into this space and think about them during the presentation. How does what you are learning connect with what you know about this learner and what you aspire for that learner as they develop their talking, oral language, and multilingual learning skills, their thinking by modeling and discourse structures, and comprehending? Are they able to comprehend both narrative and informational texts? So as we begin, we want to think about the portrait of the students who meet the Common Core State Standards. Okay, so I know that we sometimes have some kind of feeling about the Common Core State Standards, but when we look at the portrait that they are meant to address, I'm not sure that we would find many areas of disagreement. Clearly, we want to have our learners demonstrate independence, have strong content knowledge, understand that there are varying demands on them as readers, depending on the context. We want them to be able to critique what they're reading as well as understand it. We want them to value evidence and to be able to cite evidence for their thoughts and their opinions. Clearly, we want them to be able to use technology, and I think they are probably more expert at it than many of us are after this year of remote teaching and learning, and as well as understanding perspectives and cultures. So I think we can all agree with most, if not all, of these characteristics that we want our learners to have, and it begins at the earliest grades in the primary grades. And let us be reminded of the 5 pillars for effective reading instruction. This is my visualization of the 5 pillars. For me, phonemic awareness and oral language, phonics, vocabulary, and fluency all support text comprehension, that they're not individual, they really work together to support comprehension. And that is the stance that I will be taking in our time together. So there are 2 domains of reading. What should we may be in the reading wars. Have they been fought? Have they been won? It's a topic for another day. But we can agree that there are code and meaning aspects of our language. And in terms of developmental processes, for code, we want to think about early grade reading, even pre-K mastery of the code, where children start to play with words, take letters off of words and make silly rhymes out of them. So they're developing their code-based skills. And these are kind of constrained skills. They can fit into a container, and they're pretty directly taught. And so when we move into meaning, it develops from infancy all the way through adulthood. I'm still reading journals and thinking, okay, I'm a skilled reader here. How come I don't understand anything these people are saying? So I have to regroup and think about, what my intent is, what the author's intent is. And so in terms of instructional implications, the meaning-based requires this kind of ongoing, sustained instruction all the way through our lifetime. For my presentation, I want to think about this theoretical model that I've designed, where talking, thinking, and comprehending work together. They're intricately intertwined. I thought you can't really think of them in a linear fashion. They are all working together and developing in concert. So let's think about also our desired outcomes. Let's begin with the end in mind. What are we trying to do? We're trying to have primary grade students who can comprehend and perhaps even critique what they are reading. So in terms of learner-focused outcomes, we want them to have automatic decoding skills and then build up their comprehension skills. And we want them to have an intentional focus on how they are comprehending text, that these squiggles on the page that we know as words and sentences and paragraphs convey meaning. And how are they connecting with the author's intended meaning? And our desired outcome for teachers are that they use multiple sources of data, that they think about the quantity and the quality of their students' responses to questions and activities as informal, formative assessments of their instruction. And they want to think about their instruction in terms of the short term. How am I teaching this particular strategy for this particular text for these students? And how will my instruction position my learners to apply these skills and strategies to new texts? So let's think about oral language development. We have semantics and syntax. We have our word knowledge, and we have the structure of our language. So as we think about word knowledge, what is the breadth? How many words do we know? How many words do our learners know across languages. So again, we want to bring in our multilingual learners, and we want to enable our monolingual learners with an ear and a knowledge that other languages exist, and they may learn a word or two in those other languages from their peers. And then the depth, how many meanings of words do we know? So it's not only how many total words that we know and our learners know, but what are the meanings that they know? And then we think about expanding sentence structures, because the sentences that our learners will be reading are more varied and elaborated than how we speak. We don't always speak in full sentences. So the types of sentences that we are using, the declarative, interrogative, exclamative, as well as imperative, and then how many different sentences types can you use to convey the same meaning? I'm hungry. Hungry am I? I'm hungry. So we have those areas that we can express orally, and then our learners will see them in print. So there's joy in learning how to read, especially for our primary grade students. So we think about bringing in wordplay. So as we thought about the breadth and depth of our language, some activities you can use would be to say how many ways can you say something is large? So we're building synonyms. And sometimes those synonyms have very nuanced shades of meaning, like something is big versus something is gigantic. We have mental images of two very different sizes. And we also can ask our multilingual learners to bring in how you say large in their home language, and do they have variations? In some languages, large is large. And so in other languages, we have the synonym. So again, being comparative around our linguistic strengths that we bring to our learning. And then the depth, like how many ways can you use a word like run? We get into polysemy or multiple word meanings. And I've posed this question to my master's candidates. And in one class, we came up with 27 different ways to use the word run. Now, by any standards, it's a, quote, easy word, 3 letters, CVC, all the letters are consistent in their pronunciation. That's the phonemic awareness and the phonics working together, but very different in terms of the meaning and how it is conveyed, depending on the context, depending on the print. And then we have how words change. One reason that we love language is that it's organic, it lives, it changes. So we have, for example, the word wicked. It can mean something very scary, or in some cultures, a witch is a person of great knowledge and great power to be revered. Here in New England, we also use it as an adjective. Something is wicked funny, or you are wicked smart. So again, we can use a one word that can mean very different things within their context. And so this is, again, an opportunity for translanguaging and having our multilingual learners contribute productively, regardless of their mother tongue. Then we get into language play. Again, building these thinking and talking and comprehending skills. Describing realia, what's there, describing a printed book. Have you ever tried to describe a book without having it in front of you? And then comparing and contrasting. How is a book the same in print and different in this as an ebook? And again, our learners have had multiple experiences with ebooks over this past academic year. We can also build stories. Stories are a great way to build comprehension. We can have students work in small groups and create a cumulative story. You give them a story starter sentence, and then each student can add a sentence that moves the story forward. You can audio record the different groups' stories, and then as a whole class, really marvel at the differences that each group came up with the same exact story starter. Again, you'll have to have some pre-work in terms of explaining what the narrative story structure is. And one of the mnemonics that I like to use, which is easy for teachers and for learners to remember: somebody wanted, but, so, then, ta-da, you have your story. So now we're into thinking about the importance of discussion. Reading is an interaction. It's an interaction between us as the reader and the author. Are we interested in what the author is saying? Are we interested in how they're saying it? We might not be interested in the topic, but they may have a very interesting style that brings us in, so that we are actually in conversation with an author. And we want our primary grade learners to understand that they are not passive, that they have agency as they engage in structured reading activities as well as independent reading activities. Reading is also a social process. We love talking about what we're reading, what made us joyful, what made us unhappy, what made us angry, what puzzled us. And so I belong to 2 reading groups. Don't always get to read all of the books, but I enjoy the discussion. Even when I haven't read the book, I enjoy listening and asking questions about the story structure, the character, the settings. And then when I read it, I get to a point and go, oh, this is the part that so-and-so liked. Oh, all right. Okay, wait a minute. All right, something bad's going to happen. I know I've got an awareness that this is happening. So it's very social. So as we model discussions in our read alouds and with our learners, that we convey to the readers that they have something to say, some input in what they're reading. And there's a lot of research with meta-analysis that shows that comprehension is supported and is improved with discussion strategies. And we have lots of different discussion strategies. This is a very long list. Don't take notes. There's going to be a handout and giving a brief introduction to each of these. But what I want you to notice about this list is the year that these strategies were proposed. Some of them have been around for a really long time. So it can be either they have legs, they have withstood the test of time, and they are good to go in terms of using them and implementing them in your classrooms. The other can be a head scratcher of, okay, they've been around so long, so why haven't I heard of some of these, and how might I use some of these? So we will share some more information about these strategies in the handout that follows. But across all of these strategies, there are some consistencies. We have our discourse moves that, there's things like revoicing, so that you restate what someone has contributed. And that can be the teacher to the student, but I really urge you to not always make it hub and spoke, but that you encourage your learners to talk among themselves. You're there to help facilitate the discussion, but they can revoice each other's comments. They can prompt each other for elaboration. Like, could you tell me some more about that? I'm not quite sure I'm following your reasoning. Or highlighting different points. And again, that taking, juxtaposing, and puzzling responses. So one student may think that this character would be their best friend. And another student may think, I don't want anything to do with this character. And then they can be in conversation about what are the character traits that make them feel one way or another about a character. And they can bring in text evidence to support their feelings. Of course, we need to scaffold these conversations, and modeling is very important. So we're thinking about the gradual release of responsibility. I do, we do together, and then you do. That one thing that frustrates me so about English is that you is both a plural and singular pronoun. So you do means you can do it in pairs or you can do it individually. And then we want to provide sentence stems to, again, model how we have these conversations across peers, but that's especially supportive for our multilingual learners. One thing that primary grade students are very good at is perspective taking. Fairness is the watchword. I want to do that. How come it's not fair? He gets to do that. She gets to do that. I don't get to do that. They're looking at the multiple perspectives. We can do this and bring this in with the text that we choose. For example, we have the tale of the three little pigs. And we have then the true story of the three little pigs told from the fox's perspective. So by matching texts and having our learners compare and contrast the storyline, the perspective, that we are building their thinking skills, we are modeling their discussion, their talking skills, and we are supporting their comprehension. So that brings us back to the theoretical model on which this presentation was based, that talking, thinking, and comprehending are intricately connected to each other. But as we implement this type of teaching, we need to be on the same page, literally. That means that teachers and school leaders have to have a common vision of effective literacy instruction, that we see ourselves as teachers, as the guide on the side, that we are the orchestrator of productive peer interactions, and that it's very important that our peers work together and work things out together. So we may find noisy classrooms. I call them productive humming. As a school leader, which I was for many years, if I walked past a classroom that was absolutely quiet, I had three thoughts. They're not there. They're at a special, they're at recess, they're at lunch, they're just nobody's there. Or number two, they're taking an assessment and everyone needs to be quiet. Or number three, the teacher is doing all of the talking. And we know from research that the person who's doing the talking is doing the work, that our learners need to be doing the talking so that they can learn, rehearse, and embrace the strategies that they are learning to comprehend. As you reflect on this presentation, I would ask you to think about three things. What are the types of texts that your learners are reading? Is there variety across multiple dimensions? What types of questions are you asking? Are they varied on the Bloom's taxonomy? And are you offering our learners the opportunity to make text to self, text to text, and text to world connections? And finally, what types of discussions are you facilitating, not leading? So as I think about the adage, if you give a person a fish, you feed them for a day. Teach a person to fish, you have fed them for a lifetime. I hope that I have both shared some instructional strategies for you to use, giving you a fish, and I have shared some overarching processes for you to use in planning comprehension instruction for your primary grade learners, that is teaching you to fish. Here are the references that are the basis for my presentation, and I want to thank you for your interest in our primary grade learners and for improving their literacy outcomes. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Mason, for that fascinating presentation. And at this time, if for the attendees, will you please put your questions in the chat box? We have about a little over 20 minutes to answer questions. So there's one comment, noisy classrooms. That is such a fabulous point. Discussion, collaboration, and engagement. Not a question, but a good comment. I have one question. How can translanguaging support discourse and comprehension in English?
Thank you for asking that, Tamara. I think that if we're in monolingual classes or dual language classes, we need to think about how children are accessing their funds of knowledge and their languages and so that being able to have a conversation in the language of teaching and learning is one thing, but at some point you may get to that word, that you just can't remember in the language of instruction. And then learners should feel free to pull in, their home language, their mother tongue for that word, for a phrase. And then, then the community can help expand their language in English or the language of instruction, whichever it is, because it can be in a dual language. So you could have a monolingual growing emergent speaker in another language have to say something in English that then the other speakers will help them learn and use appropriately. So it's an opportunity to, again, bring our students' funds of knowledge into the language learning for all students. And as I said, you might learn a word that you didn't know before, and it may just come in handy because they're just, for me, I love the sound and the rhyme and the rhythm of language. And some words that I use that, in my home is just because it just sounds fun, or it sounds angry. It just kind of conveys a different emotion than the ordinary English word that I would have used.
So I'm looking through, I do, and if, by the way, attendees, if you have questions, please put them in the chat. I do have one more question. I'm gonna actually copy it and put it into the chat as well. But yesterday I attended the session with Dr. Peggy Carr, and she was talking about the NAEP assessment for the grade 4 students, and someone asked her about the students scoring below basic, and she asked if it was dealing with decoding or comprehension. Now, Peggy answered that not all students are the same, and that she realized work needed to be done with the reading framework. So I'll ask you the same. So with looking at the NAEP, results and seeing that we have the percentages of students that are below basic, would it be decoding or comprehension that they're having issues with, or both?
Yeah, it could be either. It could be either. And I was at I attended that session, and I also wrote down some notes from Dr. Ebony Walton, and she kind of gave us a description of what our below basic students could do at grade 4 and grade 8, and they can do the explicit details. So in their reading and producing on the NAEP, and that's a whole different set of skills. That we can think about oral language. We don't do a lot of multiple choice questions to each other when we're talking, so that we can help our students bring oral language strength to their to their reading and to their comprehension. And some of that strength will be figuring out what a word means. So then we'll have the decoding. Or it may be just vocabulary. What does it mean in this situation? Like she's running for mayor. She's not running around the block. That's a political campaign. So that's a new word for run. So they may see that within a text. So just to understand that if you see a word, and it doesn't make sense when you're reading it, then think, okay, how else have I heard, or how else have I used this word? And that also will build in the comprehension. And then at grade 8, Dr. Walton also talked about, the inferences and the textual information to respond to questions. So when students are having discussions in the primary grades, helping them to go back to the text and pointing out aspects of the text that support their perspective can also position our learners to do better on the NAEP assessments and just comprehend text in general in a better and a more efficient way.
Well, I'm looking through. If you have questions, again, please put them in the chat. And we have a little bit more time, and I have one more question that I would like to ask you as well, Dr. Mason, and I'm gonna put it in the chat. And what are the challenges teachers will have post-COVID with teaching multi-language students, coupled with having both in-person learning and remote learning? So you have the multi-language students, plus you have in-person and you have remote. So you have those platforms. So what challenges do you see for teachers?
It's going to be going back to school in August or September, whenever you start your school year, is going to be joyful. Everyone's going to be excited about being back in the classroom. Teachers decorating and preparing for their learners in the classroom will be, just a joy. And there will be the challenges, but again, in thinking about talking, thinking, and reading, these children have been talking, thinking, and doing some reading over the course of being away from the class in remote settings. Unfortunately, some of our learners have not had a high attendance rate, although at the primary grades, we're seeing that was pretty robust. It was more at the middle and high school where we had some of our learners just really checking out or having to go to work to support in the high school level to support their families. So there were good reasons for them not being there. But again, bringing students back and doing a lot of read alouds and doing a lot of conversations and getting to know each other and building community through text is something that primary teachers do all the time. And I would urge them to continue to do that. There is some sectors say, oh, we need to test and find out where they are. Like, hello, how are you? I missed you. Take a test. There's some little cognitive dissonance that happens there, but really bringing the community together and presenting text and talking about text and having students and learners talk to each other about text. And with a good ear, I know the primary grade teachers will get a sense of who's engaged, who's not engaged, and then perhaps use some more informal talking to them, assessments, looking at their work to pinpoint where some learners may need some more support.
Thank you. I don't see any more questions coming in, and we do have about 15 minutes left. But with this, if you are attending still in this session, I would encourage you to please go to the document tab and download the handout. Is full of rich resources that Dr. Mason has provided for you to complement her presentation. With that, thank you for attending this session.